welcome back to my channel. This has been a video in the making since 2018. I had a note on my notes app on my phone since September 2018 when I started to write down everything that bothered me when I first came to London, or not necessarily bothered me, but I just noticed and I had to adapt to when I moved here. I thought this could be a good video for people who live outside of London and have never been here, or for people like me who are new to the whole country. It's not gonna be a very long one, it's gonna be a short and hopefully funny but also informational. But honestly, I don't notice these things anymore, and it's been a surprise to me when I discovered this note in my phone, because I got used to so many of these things. So let's start. First of all, double-decker buses. I was so obsessed with them before coming here, and I used to see them everywhere in movies, and everyone would be so obsessed with them as well. So every time I would go on a double-decker bus, which I use all the time now, so it's not a big deal, but every time I would go to one of these, I would have to sit in the front row on the upper deck. That would be the highlight of my trip. Now, I still love to go by bus. I would usually take buses instead of the tube because I just like to look outside, and I still like to sit on that front row in the double-decker on the upper deck. And I think it's a nice view, but I used to be obsessed with it and just have to stay there and just sit like that and look outside the windows and observe the world around me from that high up. But when I used to go upstairs on the upper deck, I would almost fall every time because the driver does not wait for you to go and sit down on the upper deck, and you are kind of stuck on the stairs, so you have to brace yourself and hold to these bars really tight, because otherwise you might trip, especially if there's a curve or something like that, and you go like and then you trip. I think I only fell once, and that was very soon after I came here because I wasn't used to it. But now I just go up like this. I don't really notice when it's moving, I don't really notice when it stays, so it's not a big deal for me, but it was a big deal when I first came here. The other thing is the tube. First, you have to get used to how expensive it is, but also how twisty and complicated it is. Now, if you have Citymapper or Google Maps installed on your phone, you should be fine, but just remember to do it before you get to the actual tube station, because once you're there, you have no network, no signal, no nothing. You are left on your own. And yes, it's not extremely difficult to find your way and realize where you have to go, but it can get difficult when it's a busy platform that has a lot of connections and has like 3-4 floors, and that's where it gets tricky, which is where Citymapper or Google Maps or any app like this, it's super helpful. What you also need to pay attention to when you go to the tube, or at least the thing that I noticed, and it's been bothering me ever since, is the lack of oxygen. The tube is really deep and old, so it has little to no ventilation system, especially on the central line that gets busy and it's boiling literally in summertime, and it happens to be the one that I live close to and that I have to use most of the time in summer. But to be honest, I would rather have to change like 3 buses than go on Central Line in summer and be practically in hell. Driving on the wrong side of the road. Coming from Romania, I'm used to driving on the other side of the road, so it was quite a change for me to come here and have to adapt to looking on the other side when I'm crossing the street. And for me that was the most difficult part, because I didn't drive here, so whenever I take the bus or anything, I wasn't really paying attention to that. But when I'm crossing the street, when I came here, I used to look the other way, and that was pretty dangerous because a car could have come and I just wouldn't notice it. And now I got used to it, and whenever I'm going back home in Romania, whenever I'm crossing the street, I look the wrong way, and that's dangerous as well. And it's also a bit more tricky when I get to drive there, because I'm driving there constantly and I have to pay attention to which side of the road I am in to make sure that it's the right one. So I can say that I got pretty used to the London way of doing things. The trees are shaped by the double-decker buses. That's funny to hear, but when I first came here, I did not really understand why there was a shape like the tree would go like this, and then where the bus would go, it would go around it, and that would be empty. I'll try to find a picture so that you know what I mean. but basically because the buses go through a tree all the time, the tree starts to grow around it and doesn't really have branches where the bus goes. And where there is a tree that goes wildly, then it's got such a big loud noise whenever you hit it, because basically you just go through the tree and you hit all the branches, and that's where the bang loud noise gets to you. And I was scared at first where I didn't know what it was, but after a while I got used to it. The streets are very, very narrow, and as I said, I haven't had the chance to drive here yet, but I'm scared for that moment because the streets are so narrow that sometimes two cars coming from opposite directions cannot cross past one another, so one of them has to seize priority to the other one. And that's okay if you have space, like squeeze in like a parking space or something, but it's particularly different and complicated when it comes to buses. So if two buses are there, or if it's a car and a bus and one of them has to seize priority and there's no parking space. I mean, that's normal because London is such a big city, so when it was first built, the streets were not made for these huge buses and so many parking spaces and so many cars that we have today. I think it requires good driving skills that I think I have, but I have to wait and see. There's a lot of stealing, especially when it comes to bikes. My boyfriend used to be a delivery driver, so he would ride a bike all the time in a lot of locations throughout London, and he would be so careful with where he would leave his bike and what kind of lock he would use. So I guess if you're trying to buy a bike to use it to go to uni or to go to your workplace or whatever, invest in a good lock first of all, and make sure that you leave it in a space that has CCTV or that is just supervised by someone all the time, because you'll be surprised to see how many bikes are throughout London that are still locked and tied to one of these spaces like made for bikes, but they don't have wheels or they don't have the seat, the chair top thingy, and that's basically because they are stealing all the external parts that are easy to remove, and they are leaving the bike that's tied to the pole. But if you want to go with your bike, just make sure you put it in a safe place and you lock it like 1,000 times. It's gonna be hard to open a bank account, and that's because it's a whole vicious cycle. So basically, in order to have a bank account, you have to have a national insurance number and probably an address. But to have a national insurance number, you usually have to have a bank account or again an address. To rent something, you usually have to have a bank account, and so goes it. So it's a whole circle. But if you manage to break it and just get one of these many things, then it's gonna be super easy to get the others, which is why at first it might be overwhelming and complicated, and I believe it is actually very complicated to try to break this circle fast, but it's not impossible. Central London. If you're gonna ask Londoners how often they go to Central London, but for entertainment reasons, not just for work or because they have to, I'm not sure many of them will say that they do. And that's because when you go to Central London, all you can see is tourists. They take pictures of every little thing and they are not in a rush and they are enjoying themselves, but it's normal. It's annoying for someone that has to get somewhere, but it's normal for them because they are on holiday, they're on vacation. And I think that should make us appreciate London more, because we are lucky to be able to call it our home. The traffic routes change every weekend, and that's basically because weekends are less busy because people don't commute that much, they don't have to go to work. So TfL, which is Transport of London, they are able to do any kind of repair work or just work and do constructions on tube lines or bus routes. That's annoying because you might have your usual route that takes you like 25 minutes to get somewhere, and then something happens and they close the entire tube line and you have to get around or get replacement buses. So what I'm saying is always check your journey before you leave the house. Even though it's your usual trip and you do it every day, check it just to make sure that nothing changed, especially if it's a weekend, because weekends is usually when these things happen. And as a final thing, I would say that the thing that I was bothered the most about was people's advice. And I would say that you should listen to everyone's advice and let them say what they think, but you shouldn't trust them 100%, even if they have been here longer than you have, because things might have changed or they might simply just not have your best interest at heart. And I think always do your research and always seek different sources before you make any decisions or you go in any direction, because you might find that you yourself can find the better answer for you than someone else. That was the video. I hope it was helpful, or that maybe you experienced some of this when you first came to London as well. If you did, tell me in the comment section down below, because I'd be really curious to see. If you have any other recommendation or questions, again, leave them in the comments down below, and subscribe to my channel if you liked this video. Thank you, see you next time!